Hello, it's Dave here, and I'm with my wife Cathy.
Hello.
We are sat at home on our couch. Our son is nearly 3 weeks old, and he's sitting on the other couch.
He looks like he's asleep, so we're going to try and attempt
He's making kind of stirring noises.
a Cinemetre.
Yes, so we're going to Cinemetre Blade Runner, coming up to the release of the much belated sequel, Blade Runner 2049 is the new one.
I can't remember.
As always, we haven't looked up anything or done any research, but we've been busy looking after Oscars. So
Exactly.
Things are busy.
And no, he's not called Oscar because of the Oscars, which lots of people thought. That's not why we called him Oscar.
We just like the name.
Yeah.
We're not that sad. We actually don't like the Oscars. I have zero respect for the Oscars. And thank you, by the way, to everyone who said congratulations and sent their well wishes on
Yes,
on
thank
socials.
you. Everyone's so nice.
Huge outpouring of congrats.
Yes.
So thank you.
And we'll see how long this takes us to watch, because it took us 3 days to watch one episode of Bake Off. So
Yeah,
we've got
every
low
time-
hopes for watching this in one sitting.
Oscar has this great knack of going ballistic anytime you sort of sit down to do anything. We haven't drunk a cup of tea in 3 weeks, but we're loving it. It's great being parents.
It's great fun.
So this is going to be the first movie we are going to watch as parents.
Yes.
Cathy's never seen this before.
No, and I'm a bit embarrassed I've never seen it. It's one of those movies that I should have seen and somehow didn't. So I'm very pleased to rectify this.
Yes, and I saw it when I was 15, which as of tomorrow will have been 18 years ago. That's depressing.
Yes.
And I didn't really take to it.
Interesting.
I've only
Maybe
seen
you were
it
too
once.
young. Maybe you were too young.
I don't think 15's too young. I think it was the right age where I was well into my sci-fi. I just thought it was boring. I thought it was dull as all hell. It was one of those things where this
Dull as all hell.
dull as all hell is what I said 18
I think
years ago.
hell isn't dull. Hell is anything but
That's
dull.
a good point. It's very, very interesting.
You're being burnt.
So I'm quite interested to see how my older self looks at this now.
And I fancy me a bit of young Harrison Ford, so I'm into that.
Just if anyone's wondering, because there are apparently 8 different versions of this. I just Wikipedia'd this.
As usual, your fountain of knowledge.
Yeah, there are so many different versions of this. There was the director's cut, and then there was the final cut in 2007, which wasn't the director's cut. Or this one was the director's cut because the first one wasn't, or some nonsense.
But we're watching the theatrical version.
Yeah, not out of any preference or choice, but just clearly because that's the one that's free on Sky.
Yeah.
And we'd have to pay for the final cut.
And I don't...
Who gives a shit?
I don't care for final cuts or director's cuts because they're always too long. This one's 113 minutes. And I'm looking at the synopsis and it looks great.
And we'll talk about the main differences.
Yeah.
I know a couple of differences afterwards.
Please don't. Oh, and one more thing.
That look of horror on your
We
face.
saw a trailer for the new one when we went to IMAX to see Dunkirk, and it looked really cool.
Yeah, it looks
Yeah.
amazing.
So we're gonna...
it's Denis Villeneuve who did Arrival and Sicario, and it's been I think it's Wally Pfister or the other guy, the director, cinematographer, who he works with, and it just looks incredible.
It looks really good. So we're going to attempt to go to the cinema to see it, but for now this is the best we can do. Okay?
Yes.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
I need your deck. This is a bad one. The worst yet.
There was an escape from the off-world colonies 2 weeks ago. 6 replicants, 3 male, 3 female. They slaughtered 20...
A Blade Runner's job is to hunt down replicants. Manufactured humans you can't tell from the real thing.
What's this? Roy Batty. Probably the leader.
There was just one outfit making replicants that superhuman. The Tyrell Corporation.
Mr. Deckard, Dr. Eldon Tyrell.
I don't get it, Tyrell.
Commerce is our goal here at Tyrell. More human than human is our motto.
All right, we're back, and a day has passed. Nearly a day. It's tomorrow.
Yes.
It's today. Well, it's today. It was yesterday.
It's Dave's birthday.
It's my
Happy
birthday.
birthday.
Yes, thank you. So, yeah, we tried to watch... Well, we did watch Blade Runner successfully. It took about 5 hours. A lot of starting and stopping. And then by the time it was over, we were just too tired to talk about it. So, here we are. It's the next day. And we're out for a stroll with Oscar in our lovely Upper Baby pram.
So it's our first time doing a cinema with a pram. This is very exciting.
Yes, he's
asleep.
completely asleep.
So he's not particularly interested in our podcast.
Not interested in Blade Runner in the least.
He ignored the movie completely, and now he's ignoring us.
So I guess not a lot. We were just saying there's not a whole lot we can sort of say that's hasn't been said already in the last 35 years about Blade Runner.
Yeah, I feel like people have probably done PhDs on this movie, and I feel a bit intimidated even reviewing it. And I'm also quite tired, and we viewed it yesterday, and I'm like a little bit dozy.
Yeah, you've got a terrible memory. And also for regulars of this podcast, you know that we're not very insightful or have done no research. So really, you're just going to get our sort of raw reactions to this movie. And I'll say personally, I really loved it. I mean, I said yesterday that I hadn't seen it in 18 years, and I was a bit cold on it when I saw it. But it really worked for me this time. It's just the production design and the sets and the way this movie looks is better than a lot of contemporary sci-fi movies, I would say. It holds up.
And I can see why. Well. I can see why, as a 15-year-old, it didn't appeal to you that much, because it's quite slow paced and it's a grown-up movie. It's not a sci-fi. It's
not really an
young
action sci-fi, is it? It's very much Harrison Ford in a hard-boiled, slow detective kind of thing. But I just loved it. It just felt like such a real world. And interestingly, we watched Channel 4's Electric Dreams the other day, the series of short episodes based on Philip K. Dick's short stories.
And we watched one, it was bad. We both thought it was a bad
Yeah, it was called The Hoodmaker, and a lot of parallels can be drawn here. That was there was no androids in that, but it was a very much like a hunted subsector of humanity in a dystopian future.
And it was dull. An hour passed very slowly in that episode.
It was dull, but do you know what? It just didn't look. That did look quite good, and it was clearly a lot of money had been spent on it. But Blade Runner just is so confident in the way it looks. The world is just so lived in. There's a moment where Harrison Ford is on a video payphone talking to her, and there's just Chinese graffiti all over it. I feel like the detail in this movie is just incredible.
And the HD was fabulous too.
Oh, it looked amazing. And nothing looked like a set ever.
Yeah. Oh, now we're walking through some leaves. We're getting some nice rustling.
Yeah, it's very noisy. We're by a very busy road here. So, Cathy, I mean, it's your first time seeing it? What did
So I went into it knowing that it's a beloved sci-fi classic, and sci-fi is one of my favourite genres, and as I said, I'm a bit embarrassed I've never seen it, to be honest. I don't know how I've not seen it. So I was expecting that it's overblown, overhyped, and I wouldn't be into it. Actually, the complete opposite. I loved it. I really loved the pace of it. It was a nice slow pace. I thought the opening scene was a real cracker when there was that interrogation. Also, we're doing spoilers for this movie, by the way.
Yeah, if you haven't seen Blade Runner yet, go watch it.
Go watch it. I loved it from the opening scene. I mean, I love Harrison Ford anyway. His particular kind of grumpy nonchalance really worked in this role. I thought, as you said, visually it was beautiful. I just really enjoyed the whole world building, and I think it really stands up there as just fantastic sci-fi. Particularly, it's just really interesting that we just watched that Channel 4 adaptation, because I mean, if that's the best they can do with it, with this source material, look how fabulous this is. And I really enjoyed it, and it was really funny because we watched the original theatrical one, as we said. So by the end, the ending was the voiceover we were watching was quite funny. We were laughing at the voiceover a lot.
Yeah, so this is one of the famous things that got cut. I think against Ridley Scott's wishes, and correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, because I don't know a whole lot about the history here, but he didn't like the voiceover. The voiceover was added by the studio to provide exposition, because the studio felt that the audience wouldn't quite get it, so it's quite clunky.
But to be fair, because it's kind of like a 1940s film noir kind of feel to it, and he's the hard-boiled kind of equivalent of a grisly detective, it wasn't wildly out of place. It was just unnecessary.
I agree that the idea of a voiceover narrated fits perfectly with that detective thing, but it didn't work here at all, because the way it was written
was bad.
Felt like an afterthought, and it was explaining things that the audience should just deduce for themselves.
It was practically Harrison Ford being I'm sitting here eating a sandwich and contemplating my case.
The particularly bad one was because in the beginning it's kind of acceptable, because he's filling in a little bit of the world. One time I found it useful was when Edward James Olmos is speaking that hybrid street-level Spanish-German language. And, like, I didn't get any of that. I wouldn't have known of any of that if it hadn't just been explained to me.
Yeah, so in that sense, and also because we were getting distracted by a baby, it was kind of helpful as a recap. Now, you're not watching a movie looking for a recap in the middle of the movie, generally.
But by the end, I thought a particularly egregious one was when Roy Rutger Hauer's character dies, and then there's this sort of he does this really amazing monologue, tears in the rain.
Oh, so
and all
beautiful!
That.
And
really
I didn't know that line. Dave knew it obviously, but I didn't, and I just found it so moving.
And I remember that quite well from the first time I watched it. And then it's sort of him dying, like face down, kneeling, looking down. Harrison Ford sort of.
And he's rescued him, which is really beautiful.
It's just a great ending. And then Harrison Ford's voice comes in out of nowhere. In his dying wishes, Roy had it's like, oh, whatever.
And you could tell they were looping the clip of Roy because obviously they hadn't shot long enough because obviously they'd added in the VO afterwards. So it was just this weird kind of almost still image of Roy and Harrison Ford.
Terrible.
Yeah.
And also the other thing because as 18 years ago when I'd seen the, I think I must have seen the well, I guess it wasn't the final cut, it must have been the director's cut or something, but it didn't have that terrible cheesy ending of him driving off into the sunset with Rachel.
See, I enjoyed that because I enjoyed their relationship, and I thought it was really interesting the way she hadn't known she was an android. He reveals to her she's an android. Then I was saying, well, blatantly he's an android, which turns out, having read reviews of it, I see a lot of people think that.
There's a lot of theories about that.
Yeah, I think he's an android.
Ridley Scott himself believes it.
And then it was just interesting because he was saying, Rachel's the exception, she's going to live a long time and like they're in love. And I do love a romantic ending. So a part of me enjoyed the fact that they ended up together and I was happy about it. But another part of me was like, this does not fit the movie at all. But it was kind of interesting in a way because most dystopian sci-fi movies don't end well. So it's interesting that was the ending, although I read since obviously that was not the ending Ridley Scott wanted and he has a different one in his final cut. So I enjoyed it. What I also enjoyed was it was a very young Daryl Hannah who hadn't been in much before this. And she gives one of the worst performances I've ever seen in a movie. Like, I would compare her to Jared Leto in that Suicide Squad.
Yeah, it's a little bit
the Joker.
Deliberately over the top quirky, isn't it?
It was weird, and like watching it last night and how bad she was, I was thinking if I had seen this movie when it was originally released and you asked me who's going to become, the big female star of the next decade, I would have said the love interest character.
Sean Young.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would not have said that weird ass clown character.
She's excellent. Weird ass clown character.
Yeah, Sean Young, she's
excellent
brilliant
in this.
and she's so 40s with her, like, I love the cut of her clothes and how she was really composed and held herself, and it was really moving when she realised that she was an android and that her memories were false and that the photo of her mother wasn't her mother at all. I thought that was really beautiful. And then we have to talk about the main android. He's so enjoyable.
Roy, played by Rutger Hauer. I thought, well, it's interesting you're saying that the sort of Daryl Hannah's weird, bonkers, mad, quirky approach didn't work for you, because I thought he starts to do a similar thing as his body and mind starts to degrade.
Yeah, he did.
And I
He's
thought
a better
he
actor,
really
though.
pulled it off.
Yeah.
There's almost like elements of Jack Nicholson in The Shining, as he literally, and he does literally like ram his head through a wall, and it's
the
kind
end
of
was
playful
bonkers
and
when they were
weird,
fighting.
but it's really enjoyable.
It was really enjoyable. And I love that he had that white hair, which as I was watching it, I was thinking, this is like a real classic 80s, 90s thing, right? You would have villains with really white hair. Like, I was thinking Dolph Lundgren in Rocky.
Yeah.
I was thinking
blonde.
Wesley Snipes in Demolition Man. And I was thinking someone in one of the Die Hards is like white hair, don't they, a baddie? The kind of Germanic accent.
You're probably thinking of Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Oh,
with,
maybe.
What's his name? Jeremy Irons.
But it just seems like a real fun thing that they used to do to baddies, and this guy fully embraced it. Visually, I thought he looked great as well. And I really liked at the end that he saved Harrison Ford. That was very unexpected to me.
Yeah, which was a lovely moment until Harrison Ford's voice came in and explained to us, in those dying moments, Roy had found a newfound respect for life.
But yeah, we're at a very noisy part of the road now.
Explaining that.
But as we said, we feel like we probably don't have that much to add. I mean, this is a very heavily reviewed movie. People have written a lot about it. There's been 7 different versions of it that people have written about. I'm glad we saw the theatrical one because I like to see what was originally released.
Yeah.
Now I'd love to see the other ending, but I'm not going to pay.
A few years from now, I think we'll do that.
I'm not going to buy it and watch.
Anyway, I'm very much looking forward to seeing the new one now because, great director on board, as we said. Correction on what I said earlier, it's not Wally Pfister is the cinematographer, it's Roger Deakins, who is another amazing cinematographer. And this film from the trailers looks amazing. I can't wait to.
I know, I hope it's good. And well, A, I hope we get to go and see it in the cinema, and B, I hope it's good. But I think, it looks fantastic. And what do you think about Harrison Ford in this movie? I think he fit the role perfectly. Obviously, he was like top choice after Star Wars. He just is Harrison Ford, but that's fine. That works.
Are you asking me
what
I thought of him in this movie?
Yeah.
Oh, in Blade Runner. I thought he was amazing.
And
I thought he was great. He's just like, Harrison Ford is just effortless, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's just, I believed him as this beaten down ex-cop. He's just excellent.
And then the other thing I was thinking as we were watching this over a long period of time was, what is Ridley Scott doing faffing around with this kind of generic new Alien movie that we watched a couple of months ago, which we enjoyed, but it's meaningless. What's he doing that for when he could be doing the new Blade Runner?
Well, he's involved with the new Blade Runner. He's been bringing this to fruition since 1999. I think there's been some form of this sequel going around.
It's just I find it interesting that the Alien is the movie he chose to direct this year.
Well, they're both kind of his babies. But
Alien's had so many iterations. This hasn't. Well, other than 7 iterations of the original movie.
What's interesting is that he's in his 80s and he's like revisiting all his sort of earlier career highs, which is I think that's.
I think it's probably going to be good for the movie to have a fresh take. What I really stood out to me in this movie is just what a masterful direction it was. It's a fantastically directed and beautiful movie. So I'm really curious to see the sequel. And obviously I'm a big Ryan Gosling fan, so I'm into it.
But that's what Ridley Scott is best at. When you give him some good source material, he creates worlds.
Yeah.
And he brings visions to life, and he's just a master at that. When you sort of leave the script a bit loose, like what happened with Prometheus, then that's not Ridley's forte, and the whole thing falls over, I think, because Prometheus still looked beautiful, and I thought
it was dull as dishwater.
But it was just
I love that you just called him Ridley. Are you on a first name basis with him?
Yeah, me and Rids, me and the old Ridmeister go way back.
And also we did see that Robin Wright is in the new movie, and we love her, so
yes.
Good. Yeah.
One thing I did decide to do last night was I noticed this movie was set in 2019, which is obviously only 2 years from now. So I thought it'd be interesting to look at how much of the future that they predicted correctly.
And actually, do you know what we were saying as future goes? It looked realistic. For once, it wasn't a future that looked like the 80s. Whereas most 80s movies, when they set, or early 90s things, when they set them in the future, they just look like a really heightened version of their own fashion. But they actually pared it down a bit.
Yeah, it's got cool. Well, this was one of the first sort of steampunk looks. I think that sort of reinvented that look. So the things they got right were voice control.
Yeah.
That's everywhere now. So you got Harrison Ford saying enhance a lot on photograph.
Yeah.
Although I'm pretty sure when he's enhancing into that photograph, he seems to move around the angle a bit, which doesn't actually
make sense. It was the sci-fi equivalent of what we have now with Alexa, when we tell her to turn up the music and she turns it way down.
Except his was flawless. Instead of I wish they'd thrown in a few moments where the computer was like, please say that again, or what are you saying?
Yeah, this morning,
Alexa,
I told Alexa to turn down the music, and she turned it up to full blast. So
yeah, and nearly
that's
woke
not
her
right.
Son up.
Yeah.
There were a lot of brands in here, a lot of advertising in full screen and massive giant billboards of motion, which do exist now, very much so. But the brands were a bit of a fail. They were big brands in the 80s, which they had assumed would still be big now.
Well, they had Coca-Cola.
Well, Coke are still around, but Atari and TDK were the two big electronics advertisers in Blade Runner 2019. Neither of which you'd see much advertisements for these days. So that's kind of what they got right. What they got wrong, nobody has mobiles.
No.
Very simple one. People are still using payphones, albeit video payphones.
Yeah, but it's also post-apocalyptic, so to be fair...
It's not post-apocalyptic.
Isn't it?
No, there's no
just had that vibe. Alright. Well, dystopian. Sorry, I'm sleep deprived. So it's a dystopian version of the future, and there's 2 years to go, so maybe in 2 years none of us will have mobiles.
Sure. So you're implying that in the Blade Runner future they had mobiles, and then 2 years before the movie just chucked them all away. Is that
Well,
what
something bad happened to them, and I
went
don't
back
know
to
what.
video phones.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Another thing I got wrong.
Quick, cross the road.
There's no smoking ban. Everyone's smoking indoors
Yeah.
all the time. A lot of buildings all seem to be pyramids for some reason.
Yeah, the buildings are beautiful.
Yeah, very cool, but
Yeah.
like a bit of a strange architectural bent on that. People still use Polaroids. I guess they're kind of
People
still
still
around.
use hipsters use Polaroids,
Yeah.
and people at weddings.
But you don't insert a Polaroid into a computer and say enhance.
No.
And flying cars.
Yeah, I mean, I
Hasn't
think
happened
give
yet.
us 2
Very
years.
disappointing.
Give us 2 years and we'll have flying
Yeah,
cars.
could still get there.
Yeah. Okay, so that's it. Again, as we said, we didn't have much to add, but we've enjoyed doing our first post-baby Cinemetre.
Yeah, it was great.
And he's been very quiet. He's a perfect podcast guest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Oscar, thank you for joining us on your first Cinemile. We are actually walking for once. This isn't really a Cinemetre.
Yeah.
Usually
Bit of
that's
both.
us sitting on the couch. Thanks for listening. It's good to be back. If you want to hear more from us, go to our Twitter or our Facebook or our Instagram. We're at The Cinemile, or you can email us. We're at thecinemile@gmail.com. Cathy, any last
Yes, you
words?
can also, if you haven't already done so, it's the perfect time to subscribe to us on iTunes and leave us a review. And if you want to leave us a review, you have to search for the podcast and leave a review that way. You can't do it under your current subscriptions, which is a bit weird. Okay, that's it. And now
We
we're going to
greatly
lunch for
appreciate
Dave's birthday, and
Yes.
hope the baby doesn't wake up.
Happy birthday to me.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
All those moments will be lost in time. Like tears in rain. Time to die.